gentlemen, education is one of the most crucial things in this world, and it is something really important for a person to have and for the sake of the country itself. The problem in the status quo is that not everyone can afford higher education like universities or college. A lot of high school graduates do not pursue their higher education due to financial problems. This is why scholarship exists, but the problem with the scholarship system nowadays is that it's not really effective on fairly distributing the education itself, which is not aligned with our goal. So the scholarship nowadays are given based on the people's academic records, and it is actually not making education any more accessible worldwide. Take the case in Indonesia, for example. You can see the scholarship from the government, like LPDP. The awards from scholarship are mostly from the privileged classes and privileged province. So there's not really a lot of awardees that are from underprivileged people or a small province like Papua and so on, which we believe that this is the shape of unfairness of the system nowadays. The existence of birth lottery, different education access, and different demography from each area are the things that should be considered on scholarship awarding, which I will later explain on my arguments. Our goal is to have a fairly distributed education that are accessible to everyone in the world, and we believe that the current status quo is not enough for us to achieve our goal. Before we move on to the arguments, I would like to state some definition and mechanism. So what we mean by the scholarship here is like it is a free tuition that is given to people to pursue a higher education. It's basically when the department or department gives you money to pursue higher education, or you're given a free access to education. But in this case, we want the scholarship to be given on the basis of the financial necessity. We are going to make it accessible to everyone, but we are considering the financial condition. For example, we're not going to give the scholarship to people who are rich or really privileged until they can actually they are actually financially stable and they can afford the education that they really want and what they need. Instead, we are going to give the scholarship based on the necessity and the necessary amount of the money that they need. So if you're poor, we're giving you a full scholarship if it's what you need. But if you are pretty capable or you're pretty privileged to have one but you don't have enough money to pursue it, we're going to give you the scholarship too, but we are going to give you only the amount that you need. So how is this making the education itself accessible? Because we're putting everyone in the same track and the same floor, considering their privileges and some things like that. And we finally know what to prioritize, unlike the status quo right now. So before I move on to my arguments, I will try to explain why these are really justifiable by answering some questions, which are: why should we do this? Why should we propose this motion? Why is it okay to propose this motion? And comparison, and also the best and worst scenarios. So moving on to the justifications, why should we do this? Education is everyone's right to gain, and essential of education itself is to unlock each individual's potential and chances to learn. Through education, a lot of benefits can be unlocked, either from the person itself or for the country itself. So how important is education until it is everyone's right to have? Education is the key to ourselves and to develop our country, right? And our way to live in the future. Also, we should accommodate humans' interest on learning, because we never really want to stop learning, and we always have the urge to learn in our life. Besides, we all need to learn to keep on living. We need it for job, for living, for make innovations, to socialize, and to minimize conflicts, etc. Education is really important for the sake of everything, especially in the status quo, where people are really capitalistic, competitive, and really demanding. So, why is it okay for us to propose this motion? We are making education more accessible here and more fair to everyone in the layer of the society. You see, people's awareness of education is everywhere, but sadly, the access is not. So the main point of this argument is how people's awareness and the accessibility is not really going aligned, or not really fair. Because the reason why people are not pursuing their education or not able to pursue it because of the inaccessibility. Because a lot of people want education, but when they know that they cannot afford it or get it, they will prefer to leave, and they will prefer to leave their dreams behind. Making the scholarship more accessible means that we are giving them more choices, because all this time they are left with no choice, right? So for example, now poor people can have the choice to have education or not, because it is free and they can pursue it, and it benefits them too, rather than not having education. This is how the raising of awareness from people of the education is going to work, because they are left with choices that are going to benefit them in the future. So comparison, this is way better than leaving some people with no choice and not knowing what to prioritize, right? So Now, our worst case would be, what if the awardees are not as good as before? Well, scholarship givers has their own interest on giving it, so they would request the awardees to give contribution after they get the scholarship itself. So, well, I believe that there's no way that this would happen, since they have their own moral burden and their own interest on getting and giving the scholarship itself. But if it does, it's totally fine, because we are at least we are giving and we are accommodating everyone's right, even the underprivileged one, on education. We are giving them access to pursue education, which is really crucial, and it's everyone's right. And yes, and that is, which is our best case. And the second worst scenario would be the rage from people who feel discriminated because they don't get the scholarship because they're rich. Well, example from the upper class. First of all, it won't happen, because we can't really think that they are that irrational, and they're also really capable for them to pursue it. So it still benefits them, right? And on the other hand, what kind of rage would they do? Like, would it be that big? Because from the start, there's nothing to lose. They're really privileged and they have the money to pursue it. So even if it's big, it is nothing compared to the unfairness of education in the status quo and the benefit that we are going to have. The discrimination is not really exclusive, and it is still better than not accommodating everyone's right in the layer of society. In the other hand, our best scenario is where we are finally having a fair education for everyone, and it is also beneficial for the person itself and the country. For example, in a conflicted country or country with crisis, well-educated people can look for ways to solve their problems and to end the crisis. But in developing country, they can find ways to make their country developed, make a lot of educations and innovations, and probably just influence everyone to have a good education, because they are well educated and they are giving a good influence to society, and they're benefiting the society and also the country and themselves. And for a developed country, they can find another way to solve different problems in their area, just like racism, social and cultures, and whatever. There's still a lot of develop in the developed country, and I believe through education it is going to happen. And yeah, for us, we believe that there's a lot of education and there's a lot of benefits to reach for education, and it's really wide, really beneficial for long term or for short term. So for us, this is why we should propose this motion, and we are proudly proposing this motion, and it is really better, it's way better than not proposing this motion. So yeah, and then by that, I rest my case. Thank you.